You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a discussion panel that was recorded at DragonCon 2017.
In Game of Thrones, this is a topic that has raged for some years, and now we get to talk about it here at DragonCon. I'm super excited for this. My name is Billy Todd. I will be today's moderator. Let me get a couple of house cleaning issues out of the way up front. Yes, please.
Sell that.
Yep.
Yeah, DragonCon is running a charity. You probably heard this one to death. So on your way out, please leave your wallets here. And DragonCon is doing a $100,000 match for Georgia Special Olympics and a $25,000 match towards Hurricane Hunger relief.
Oh, that's good.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Thank you. Take that down. And also, can you hand me that map right there? Jen, I have to confess that I've forgotten the details on this map. Can you please explain what the deal is?
Yeah, this map, is this on? Yeah, this map is donated to the track by an artist whose name is escaping me at the moment, who is in the vendor's hall.
His name is Kiefer Mendel.
Yeah, there it is. And he works in leather typically, but this is a print of one of his leather maps. And we are going to be raffling this off at the Tolkien panel tomorrow because it's a Tolkien map. It's really, really awesome, and so if you are interested in getting it, come check out the 80 Years of Tolkien panel that we're doing tomorrow morning.
Okay, so first I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk about ground rules for this discussion. So first we'll start off with Andrew.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew. Some of you may have already heard me on other panels and the high fantasy tracks. I am just a longtime fan of Game of Thrones. I think I watched the first episode, then said, oh gosh, I got to read everything out there about this. So I went back, read all the books, all the prequel stuff, spent hours on the wiki of Ice and Fire. I attended Ice and Fire Con. I just absolutely love everything about Game of Thrones books and shows, so I'm excited to talk about it today with you.
Hey y'all, I'm Tara. Yeah, if you've been to any of the Game of Thrones panels this weekend, you'll know most of us here, I guess. I'm Tara. I am an author, a blogger, a webcaster, and an event planner. I run a couple conventions, but most importantly for this particular situation, I run Ice and Fire Con, which was the first ever Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones convention in the Western Hemisphere. We just had our 5th year in April this year, and so yeah, next April is going to be our 6th, which makes me feel so old that I've been doing this for that long.
When does that take place?
It's the last weekend in April.
And where?
It's in Columbus, Ohio. Everything's on, if you go to iceandfirecon.com or just look at any social media, it's Ice and Firecon all spelled out, so yeah, we're easy to find.
And I'm Jennifer Liang. I'm the director of High Fantasy here at DragonCon. Previously to this, I ran the Wheel of Time track here at DragonCon, and then took a little break and then came back to do this. And I picked up the first Game of Thrones, the Game of Thrones novel, the first A Song of Ice and Fire novel, because it had a pull quote from Robert Jordan on the front of it saying, "This is exactly the kind of fantasy that I like to read." And I was like, "Well, okay, I need something to do while I wait for you to put the next book out." So this looks good, and it's probably just a trilogy, right? So I'll get this one done while I'm waiting for the next Wheel of Time book to come out. And like little did I know, here we are today. So.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about expectations for how this panel is going to go and expectations for the room. I expect this to be a potentially sensitive topic. You can write entire blog posts, dedicate entire blogs, crush your Tumblr, and destroy each other in the comments over the topics that we'll be discussing today. I prefer that none of that happen in this room. The rule I'm going to lay down as the moderator is we will absolutely be taking questions and comments from the audience after a little bit. We will only have one human speak at a time. Our panelists will not speak over each other, and our audience members will not speak over each other, no matter how batshit crazy the other person is. So that's my one of 3, right?
Yes, you're good.
So, with that said, please do not shout out or cry out in alarm and dismay at anybody else's observation until you are handed the microphone by one of our 2 stalwart volunteers in the back. Thank you. Everybody cool with that? Great. If not, please leave. Thanks. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about, the topic right now, the subject line of this panel is toxic masculinity in Game of Thrones. And for this, we're going to be discussing both the books and the show. There is a difference between the two, and that's going to be something we're going to talk about. But first, before we get into toxic masculinity, I want us to talk about masculinity without that adjective. And so the first question to establish is, what is, I guess, what we'll call good or benign masculinity that is not toxic? What do we mean by that? Andrew, start us off.
And when Billy told me this, of course, my training from law school came back, and I'm like, question the question. What is masculinity in the first place, and why should we even give a particular definition to it? I think one of the issues in Westeros is, there's this really strong set definition of masculinity, and I think one of the clearest examples is with Samwell Tarly. We all know Samwell prefers books over swords. He prefers, soft fabric over armor. He likes learning. And he's considered not manly. He's called Lord Ham, he's called a Leviathan, he's called a whale, he's made fun of, he's mocked by almost all the other guys in the series that he comes into contact with, except for Jon and a few others. But yet he's very intelligent, he kills a walker, he's Sam the Slayer, and he has all these positive attributes which, could be considered very manly, but they're not by that society. So I think, when I think of good, I think of opening up the definition to include more things, where, the definition would include someone like Sam and not just somebody like the Mountain or somebody has pure physical prowess.
I guess, the way the Game of Thrones, or the Song of Fire, when you're in that series, like you said, their definition of masculinity is, it's medieval. It is super medieval. It's like, if you are good with a sword and, even look at like Renly and Loras, they're both very talented, fighters and everything, but they're still kind of like, whisper from the side, mocked because they like nice clothes. So it's a very, very, old, specific definition of masculinity in this world. And I really think the easiest way to describe it is just saying it's go back, look at medieval era, possibly even like before. And that's what George, wrote for, like, into his story.
Yeah, so I think some more positive depictions of masculinity, like more benign characteristics, like you think of Ned Stark is a father, he's a provider, he's definitely like a manly man, but everyone thinks very highly of him, everyone kind of emulates him, at least in the North, and those traits that are his strengths are traditionally masculine strengths. He is the caretaker of his family, but he's not like a hands-on dad. He's more of like a, hey, I'm going to stand and watch you from this balcony while you play around the yard kind of guy, and like enjoy like my kids playing kind of thing. He spends time mostly with his sons, teaching them masculine arts, but he's cool with his daughters pursuing their own interests. So that's sort of what I think of when I think of like a positive depiction of masculinity in the series.
So sorry. When I think of elements of masculinity, some of the things that I think of are things like strength and capability and knowledge, and for the archetypal for us, obviously not for people of Westeros, but sort of the archetypal masculine figure for 21st century America is like James Bond, right? Like James Bond is a guy who, when he shoots, he doesn't miss, and he has prowess with his weapon. He has shocking endurance. He also knows trivia. He always knows how the champagne's supposed to be served. He's worldly. He knows the rules of his society.
Like sophisticated.
He's very sophisticated, man of good taste, all these things. But Tara made a comment a second ago about Renly and Loras are mocked because they like nice clothes. But of course, James Bond walks around in a well-tailored tuxedo, right? This is a difference between the definition of masculinity as we perceive it versus masculinity as they perceive it in Westeros. And I think this point that you just made about Ned Stark is exactly correct. I think Ned Stark is sort of what Martin holds forth as what Westeros deems as sort of the paragon of benign masculinity. Is there anybody else that sort of fits that mold who's not not the jackass dad, but is instead the cool dad? The cool dad. Right? I mean, Robert certainly does not fit that mold.
No, not Robert.
Right. These figures are very rare.
Uh-huh.
Davos.
Yeah, Davos is one.
And that applies for book and show. That's a good example.
And I think Stannis has some elements of that. Like he's a caring and capable dad. He cares for until.
Apart from that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
We're talking. Can we clarify? We're talking book Stannis here. Let's just focus on book Stannis.
Book Stannis is definitely like a better person than show Stannis, just overall. But book Stannis is very like he's a capable ruler. He's very determined. He realizes pretty quickly, like, oh, the real threat is in the north. Who cares who has the throne if the world ends? I'm going to go take care of this bigger threat. So very canny. The Iron Bank backs him over Cersei because they know he'll actually pay them back at some point. He's better traits in general in that direction.
Andrew, do you have a comment?
I would also say another one would be Book Doran. He is, he clearly cares about his children, doesn't want them to go off and die or start a war or do anything rash. So he's clearly thinking about these things and trying to keep them all in line.
Guys, can you speak towards the audience into the mics? Because when you can
sorry.
over, you can actually hear very well.
Yeah, sorry. So I said Book Doran. That's the leader of Dorne. I think Alexander Siddig played him on the show.
That's right.
And once again, in that, he actually manages to keep them out of trouble instead of getting stabbed in the back by his own family, which is, shows that he cares. And he, not only that, but he understands his children. He understands their motivations. When Arianne, his daughter, wants to go off on this, crazy revenge quest, he says, no, think about it. Here's some books, do some reading, take some time, and figure out a longer game that's not going to get us all killed.
Sure.
And I do want to second Davos, honestly, because there's literally nothing that Davos ever does wrong, in my opinion. He's not like my really top 3 favorite characters because those have been set in stone for a long time. But yeah, Davos is like, he's just so good, y'all.
Davos can sometimes he might be incorrect, but he's never wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I really love that. So we sort of laid down the baseline masculinity. So now we're going to get into the real meat of it, which is when we go toxic masculinity. What do we mean by that phrase here? Andrew, go ahead.
I think I would just start with just generally, I think of oppressive masculinity when I think of something that's toxic. I even think that can apply not just in the Randall Tarley situation, where you're actually shipping your son off because it doesn't meet your expectations, but also with, Tywin, where he is so oppressive with all of his children in terms of his expectations, in terms of what he wants from them. It's really overbearing, and it ends up kind of perverting all of them, or really changing and scarring all of them because he is just so oppressive.
For my part, I think that it's very easy to get into the toxic masculinity and how it affects the male characters and the way they act, but what makes it truly toxic, I think, is how it spills over into the female characters. Literally everything Cersei is because of the toxic masculinity in this world. She crazy, and it's it's because of the way she was raised by her father, who is one of the best examples of super toxic masculinity in this series.
So when I scheduled this panel, I was thinking of Tywin. Because I think he's just such a great example, precisely for what the other panelists have said. Just the way that he's like, okay, it's my way or the highway, we're going to be like this. The way he treats Tyrion, because Tyrion is not the son he wished he had. And it's not just because Tyrion's birth killed his wife, it's because, oh, this is what I get out of this, you took my wife and you're going to suck as my son? Okay, this is how we're going to play things. Yeah. He will not name Tyrion as his heir because he can't conceive of, this is going to be what follows me. This is not going to be my heir. This is not how the Lannisters are going to end up with Tyrion. I have to pretend that he's my son, even though I don't really believe he is, because I don't want him to be my son. But I'm not going to let him have the full benefits of being the son of a Lannister.
So before I said, I was giving what I think of elements of masculinity, strength, knowledge, capability, that sort of thing. I think when it goes toxic is when, like Tara was saying before, is when strength becomes mistaken for the exercise of power. right? When Tywin is doing all of these things because he can, or because he's trying to increase the power of his house, and by his house he really means his own vanity and his legacy and these sorts of things. And I think what Jen said before about Ned Stark being sort of the paragon of this is the good way to go. Everybody else up here has said Tywin, and I'm going to give a different quote. My mother wishes me to let Lord Eddard join the Night's Watch. Stripped of all titles and powers, he would serve the realm in permanent exile, and my lady Sansa has begged mercy for her father. But they have the soft hearts of women. So long as I am your king, treason shall never go unpunished. Sir Ilyn, bring me his head. Joffrey. That is Joffrey, and that is Joffrey passing the sentence and refusing to swing the sword himself. And I think that this really encapsulates the difference for me. When Jen first said, "Oh, I want to do a panel on toxic masculinity," and she had Tywin in her head, I immediately went to Joffrey because of the way Joffrey is depicted. This is show Joffrey. Show Joffrey a little different from book Joffrey. But I think, and you guys who definitely know this stuff better than I do, my recollection is, at least in the books, it's stated that the reason why the attempt is made on Bran Stark's life is because Joffrey, it is later deduced, Joffrey is trying to terminate Bran in an attempt to show his dad how good of a man he is. Is that true?
Yes.
Am I correct about that?
Essentially, yeah.
How can you get more toxic than that?
I'm going to impress you, Daddy, by murdering people.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a cripple killed so that you will love me even more, Dad. That's
Well, and a lot of what Joffrey does is because he's trying to. He never really connects with Robert as his father. Well, I know what I just said. Okay, but he believes Robert to be his father, but he never really connects with him. And whether it's because at some level they know that they're not really related to each other, or because Cersei's interfering with the relationship, or they're just not the kind of people that connect with each other, we don't really know from the text. But, well, maybe you know better than I do.
Just real quick, there's a hint, or actually it's outright said that Robert gets bored with children. He likes them when they're babies. He likes to, I think the exact quote is, dandle them on his knee. I hate that phrase. But he likes them when they're babies. He likes to play with them and cozy up to them when they're babies. And then the second they get to the point where they can talk and stuff and are walking around probably, he wants nothing to do with them. So.
But Joffrey is also, all these characters, Joffrey, I think, is a great example because he is an amalgam, like a Frankenstein's monster that was created by these other characters. He was influenced heavily by Tywin, by Cersei, by the Lannister entourage, which all carries the same toxicity based on their general environment.
Well, and Robert, too.
And Robert,
yeah,
too.
But there's always an element of, I'm trying to impress my daddy when Joffrey's doing anything. He's trying to be a king like he pictures his father to be. He doesn't really know Robert, so he doesn't know that Robert was bad at his job. But he's the picture in his head of what a king should be like, what a powerful man should be like. His pictures are Tywin, his pictures are Robert, and so he's trying to be that, an amalgamation of that, and he's also kind of cray-cray on the side. So it's really, really bad.
I'm intrigued by we as the audience, and here I'm speaking as a TV viewer. I read the first 3 books long ago. When I think the third one had just come out, and I haven't read any books since because I've been waiting for them all to finish.
Good luck.
This is an interesting life decision I've made. But the first scene where we're introduced to Ned Stark is the scene where he passes the sentence and swings the sword himself. The first scene where we're introduced to Tywin is at the end of that season, I believe. It's at the end of that season after we've already seen Ned. We know who Ned is, and I think technically the first scene is after Ned has already passed. Is that not true?
No, I think it was both in the books and the show. It was Clash of Kings that we meet Tywin, and then so season 2 of the show, and it was it's a couple episodes in because it's during the it's when Tyrion comes down from the mountain from the Eyrie, and they're about to go into battle on the.
They're already at war with.
There's some battle they're going into. There's too many battles. I can't remember this one specifically.
Yeah, the first scene where we see Tywin Lannister in the flesh, he's skinning a deer. I think is what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that's followed up shortly by the scene where he rides his horse into the throne room and in battle armor covered in blood, and then it defecates on the floor.
Yeah, what a champion. Right.
But that's masculinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not that many.
But these are the first character beats we get for him directly on camera, and this is where we see, when we hear of him by reputation long beforehand, but when we see himself with his own actions are presented as not masculine; they're hyper masculine. These are, I mean, I'm going to skin a deer in front of you while we're having this conversation about overthrowing this renegade. That is super. That's boss. That's Bond villain level stuff.
Yeah, there's an element of performativeness to it. Like he's like, I need to make an impression, so I'm going to skin this deer and I'm going to ride my horse, and oops, it pooped, but I still look badass.
Yeah, I think that's right. So we mentioned before about the fact that Joffrey in a way is sort of a victim who perpetuates things. Willingly as he goes. What other characters have we seen? And here we can listen in an entirely long list of people who are impacted by not the masculinity of others, but by the toxicity of them. And no points for saying Sansa. Keep going.
Theon's a good one.
Oh man.
Yeah. I mean, he's got a lot to prove. I mean, because he's got such an identity crisis. He's in a perpetual identity crisis, which is probably why he has this anxiety in himself. He probably has like a very anxious attachment issues, so therefore he engages in whoring. He, is trying to be manly. He's trying to be the best. I think he was the one, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe in the books, he proposed to kill the direwolves at first, right, when he found them?
Yes.
So, he's trying to show off, I can kill it, it's a direwolf, but I'll kill it right here. And he goes off on this stupid quest to take Winterfell. Zero strategic value, but just to prove that he really doesn't care about them. I mean, that's somebody who's heavily impacted.
And I would say to prove that he is worthy of a society which is itself corrupted by the toxic definition of what it means to be a masculine figure.
Yeah, like one of the first things that happens to him when he comes back to the Iron Islands, they ask him, like, how did you pay for all that stuff, that nice clothes you're wearing? Did you pay the gold price or the iron price? Well, the iron price is the badass, I murdered someone and took this price. Like, why wouldn't you want to pay that price? Like, you don't want to like be like a hooker and like get stuff given to you. And so that's one of the reasons he goes off on, let's go and kill people who took care of me, because I need to prove that I'm not corrupted by their ways. I'm still one of you guys, one of the cool kids.
I mean, I really think like the best way to answer that question is it's to just answer it with a question: who isn't impacted? I mean, and honestly, like, little side note, it's not just the characters. It's the readers and the viewers of the show who are impacted by it as well. The way D&D write the show, their own toxic masculinity affects the way these characters were so well written, and they not good.
So I want to pause on that particular distinction, because I think that's going to be a big one that we'll get to here in a second. I think also the question here of the honor culture of the North. I know that it's really important to them that oaths have to be upheld, and no matter what, if you go back on, there's a big conflict that occurs across several of the seasons and throughout the books of, okay, which is more important? Is it the fact that is the fact that an oath was broken? Is it the fact that they rose up in rebellion? What is it that requires somebody to be for Rob to decapitate a guy, right? And there's a big debate about the morality of this, and I think that there are other cultures we talked about the Iron Islands, right? What about for example the Dothraki, right? Where do we run into this phenomenon creating problems in other cultures, even outside of Westeros, maybe in Essos itself?
So I don't think we get a whole lot of examples of men in the Dothraki to be able to say this. Like, we get Khal Drogo, and I think he's the Dothraki man that we spend the most time with in the books. And he is just awesome at being Dothraki. Like, he is the Khal of cows. He has the most horses. His hair has never been cut. He's so powerful that he's able to get himself a Targaryen to be his bride. He's going to invade Westeros. He's going to sire the horse that mounts the world, or whatever the prophecy is. Like, he is the baddest of badass asses, and like the Dothraki love him. So I don't think we get a counterexample of that. I don't think we see someone who suffers because of this masculine identity that the Dothraki have. I'm sure there's a Dothraki somewhere who can't live up to this Khal Drogo standard, and really, like, his life sucks for it. You kind of see with Viserys not understanding Dothraki culture and understanding that they think he's less of a man because he refuses to ride a horse. Like, he thinks he's like kings don't ride everywhere like smelly Dothraki. Like, I'm going to ride in a nice cart or a carriage, and like he thinks he's being given a favor. And like the respect that he's due as like future king, and they're all like, this loser. And so I think that's the only time you really see like the Dothraki's definition of masculinity impacting a character in a negative way, other than some of the early stuff that happens to Daenerys. Because I think we just spend so much time with Khal Drogo, and he's just so good at being Dothraki.
I mean, honestly, the Dothraki society is very, it's a matriarchal society at the end, because they're run by, the Dosh Khaleen.
Yeah.
But, really, like, honestly, Khal Drogo himself is a perfect example of it, because he is so great, but then the moment he gets injured and he can't ride a horse, it's like, we should just kill him. You know what I mean? That's what they do. They're at the first sign of weakness, they cut off that limb. In this case, like, Khal Drogo was that limb, and Dany just happened to kind of speed up the process for them, I guess. Good job, Dany.
Yeah, and we do have other good countercultural examples, and we have the Rhoynar, we have the Dornish, the Summer Islanders that have other cultures that are much more open, much more understanding. Granted, the show doesn't go into those, which is once again an issue we're going to talk about. But there are counterexamples out there in the books, as well as in the prequel and supplemental material, of societies that are much more equal than some of the ones we see in Dothraki in the north.
So I think we've put it all far enough. I think I want to unleash Tara here. Tara's bouncing in her chair. Yeah, everybody, I think. There is a difference between George R. R. Martin's approach to Westeros and those whom are lovingly called D&D, the two writers. What are their full names?
David and Dan.
David and Dan. Benioff and Weiss.
Benioff and Weiss.
Weiss and Benioff, gotta get it in the right order, right? Their approach, particularly after they started to deviate from the source material, has been heavily criticized in some corners, and I think one of those corners is about to manifest on the table. So, Terry, you've got the
No, I mean, listen, I'm going to try to be as nice about this as possible. So there's an example, both a woman and female character and a male character, who I think are perfect examples of D&D or not knowing what they're doing in a lot of cases. The male example being Loras. In the books, he has a showy element to him, but it's Renly who's the one that wears like fancier clothes and everything. And in the show, they put all of that onto Loras, because he's like the titular gay character. Like, he's got to be super super gay. He can't
he's
good. Yeah, he's a good fighter still in the show, sure, but like he also gets that showy aspect that was actually Renly's in the books, and then on top of that, he loses, the love of his life, and in the books, he joins the Kingsguard because once the sun has set, no candle can replace it. Whereas in the show, like an episode later, he is just fucking everybody, you know what I mean? And he basically is kind of his own ruin and the ruin of his sister in a lot of ways, because of that. And like, again, the toxic masculinity in this respect is that they apparently, Benioff and Weiss couldn't imagine a world in which a gay man would be so in love with somebody that he would, essentially become like a monk when that lover died.
Tim, let me ask you, how much do you think that was done because they felt it was necessary for plot purposes with the faith militant? Or how much of it was just because of their characterization?
I mean, I don't see any reason why Loras had to be imprisoned. I they could have told that story without him. They like being part of it. I mean, it's told in the books without him being part of it. It's all orchestrated by Cersei, just being an idiot. They chose to turn it into a situation where Loras became part of it because he was gay, and they wanted to show the faith as being, super super religious. I don't really know how to word this without probably offending somebody, but and that's like Loras. And then the other one that I wanted to mention is Brienne. In the books, Brienne is so amazing, but she's never killed a person before. She doesn't kill her first person until halfway or more through Feast for Crows, right? Versus in the show, she's swinging her sword and murdering people 2 episodes after we meet her or something. It's probably more than 2 episodes, but they couldn't differentiate between a woman who can be a woman but super badass and a woman who is just a man in a woman's body, is the way they portray her. It's lazy writing, and also it takes away from the idea that there can be layers, that a woman doesn't have to just be badass or super feminine, that there is a middle ground there. So yeah, those are my 2 examples.
Yeah, I would say for that part, I mean, bringing up Renly and Loras just reminded me of a general grievance with the TV show, and when they're dealing with most of the queer characters, not just Renly and Loras, but also any of the folks in Dorne that are, once again, Dorne in the TV show is dealt, with in a completely negligent manner. Oberyn was probably the one that was portrayed generally well, in terms of his open-mindedness. He really didn't care. But in terms of the rest of the characters, they're almost seen as a trope. I mean, I remember that trip to Dorne, I was thinking Xena, warrior princess almost, with when they were doing that rescue mission. But then what's happened to all the characters? They're either dead, they're kidnapped. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to Yara. She probably is going to die. And it just is a systematic, elimination. Now, some of those also died in the books as well, but they've been treated systematically in a way in which does not portray them in a favorable light, I think, in the TV show.
Okay. We've now reached the halfway point of today's panel, so I will now release the camera in the audience. And if we have questions or comments, now's your chance to please do so politely. Start with Jeff. You go.
Just curious how you guys would categorize this. To me, I think Grey Worm and lesser, but Varys is probably the for lack of a better term, the healthiest kind of display of masculinity, in the sense that they're not driven, but they're driven out of that quote-unquote typical masculine trope, compared to we've seen other characters go off through it. Ned Stark, I think, kind of got toxic, his whole oath, and we're seeing it in Jon. So I'm just curious to hear your feedback on that.
So I'd like to, I'll make one point there and then I'll open it up to the rest. I don't know that necessarily Ned's era came out of toxicity in his masculinity. He does still have that tragic flaw, right? There's the sort of Greek element of every character has to have that one thing that brings them down. And I think that's sort of what we see manifested there in Ned, is the fact that he's just so honorable he can't wrap his way out of he can't get his way out of this spot, right? But yeah, you're going to clarify what you're going to say?
But he flipped. So, one of the last scenes with him, he flipped because he thought he'd get that leniency, and he still got beheaded.
Yeah.
So to me, that's where the toxicity kind of
I see.
came in.
So the desperation that he was in.
Exactly.
Panel, you want to address that?
Yeah. Turn my mic off. I don't want to. I kind of agree with that with Billy, that I don't want to conflate honor with toxicity necessarily, because I think those things aren't necessarily mutually compatible always. But I definitely do think that the Unsullied have some sort of a mixed bag. They are portrayed in a way as masculine, as great fighters, but yet they're looked down upon by others. They're kind of mocked, more so I think more so probably in the show than the books, just based on the offhand comments that other people will make, but they're still, I mean, at the end of the day, they're still the only ones that stop the Dothraki. The only people who have ever stopped the Dothraki are these Unsullied eunuchs. So they've got something to say there.
I mean, in the show, it's definitely like a situation where they're making a joke out of the fact that these dudes are eunuchs, and this isn't something we in this day and age are experiencing, so I don't think it should be something to joke about, but I suppose that would be part of their humor, because obviously, like, if you're a man but you don't have the parts in their minds, that makes you, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Andrew. In Viking culture, they actually castrated people for certain reasons, and it was like the worst punishment you could receive, because by being castrated, that literally meant you were not a man, in which case you were nobody anymore, because you also weren't a woman. So yeah, it's the way Varys and Varys is so different from like Grey Worm and the Unsullied, but the way they act, I don't really know as if I think that they are all that affected by the toxic masculinity, but maybe that's the way, maybe Martin wrote it like that on purpose.
So I don't think Varys has any issues of being
I had to say that.
being a man or not a man, or whatever he considers being a eunuch to be. But I think the people around him have issues with it. Everybody's like, ooh, like that's the creepy eunuch guy. So I think that even if Varys himself doesn't have any kind of psychological hang-ups about being a eunuch, I think the world around him is like, ugh, creepy dude. And a large part of why they think he's a creepy dude is because he is a eunuch. Because he has this kind of otherness to his sexuality because of that point. And so, again, Varys is fine, but everybody else treats him very differently, and I think he kind of plays on that expectation that people have of him.
I think there's an element of that to the eunuchness of Varys and the Unsullied that are two different sides of the same coin. The Unsullied are that way as an element of control, right? They're not only is there.
It's like gelding a horse, right?
Right. Yeah. Their free will. The intent of doing this is to undermine their free will in some way. Whereas for Varys, it's the opposite. One of the reasons why Varys isn't trusted is because nobody understands his motivations, because he doesn't think in the same way that they do. Right? He isn't distracted by the same distractions that they are, and so therefore he's unpredictable and alien, and can't be trusted. And I think that's a very that's not only a medieval view. I think that's a modern view of people like Varys. I think that's true. Do we have another question?
I think even more than Loras, someone that got the shaft male-wise in the show, so there's maybe not more than Loras, but in a different way, Jamie. Like, you ever read the books beyond?
Oh no, I'm familiar. The Wiki of Ice and Fire is very helpful. It saves me a lot of time.
Jamie in the book 5 is like, he's one of my favorite characters. He is, when he gives Cersei basically the fuck off and burns her letter, and he's constantly thinking about Brian. He's gotten out of his I just need sex mentality. Now he's actually thinking about love. And in the show, well, we know finally at the end, sorry, spoilers, at the end of the episode, he finally GTFOs.
For a wholly unrelated reason.
Yeah.
Right? His motivation for doing so is totally different from
I'd love to hear comments.
I totally agree. Book Jamie is always one of my favorite characters, but whenever I say that to somebody who's just watched the shows, they're like, Jamie's your favorite character? Really? Because you see so much inflection, so much change in him, and you realize he's coming from a scarred past. Once again, Tywin is your daddy. So, that's what you've been dealing with your whole life. You've seen how he's treated Tyrion, how he's kind of pushed him out for deviating. So you're trying to stick to this path, you're trying to please him. When he became a Kingsguard, he said it was the proudest moment of his life, until he found out that Tywin is extremely disappointed because he can no longer be his heir, and that only left Tyrion. So, he's deeply impacted by that, and he does change. And the way that he was portrayed in the TV show extremely angered me, because that's kind of the opposite almost of the way it went in the books.
I'll be real. I kind of Jamie in the show doesn't really exist for me. Like show Jamie. There's a website that like renamed all the characters. I'm pretty sure they call him Larry Lannister. They have a name for Cersei too, but yeah, no, he. I can't remember what hers is, but so Larry Lannister in the show, he. and I don't really know what their point was with him, because he is one of the most, sort of, he has a really great arc in the books, and even when he's frustrating, you can still see him slowly, growing and changing, whether or not you like the decisions that he's making. In the show, he is raping his sister and, then staying with her until literally the last episode, and he has no agency. I really don't even understand what his point is in the show anymore. Like, I'm shocked he lived through this season. Like, I still don't know how they dragged him out of that lake.
I was in legitimate suspense as I survived that last scene.
Yeah, I was
because
too.
I thought, wow, they're almost at a point where his character has nowhere else to go. Oh, I guess he does. He's going to go out the door. Right?
Yeah.
Well, he can't because he's got to kill Cersei.
Yeah.
That's true.
Book Jamie, and I'm going to ignore show Jamie because show Jamie is so inconsistently
You mean Larry?
characterized. Yeah, Larry.
Larry.
Larry is so inconsistently characterized. You can't even say he has an arc at this point. But Book Jamie is a great example of someone who's defined himself by these masculine traits, and then when he loses his hand and is maimed, and he can't do the things that he's the way he defines himself anymore, he's really lost. He goes through this depressed period, he's all nasty looking, he lets his stump get all infected, he thinks he's gonna die, and then he kind of pulls himself out of that with Brienne's help and realizes, oh wait, I still have things I can do. I can define myself in different ways and still do some of the things I'm good at. I love the part in the book where he's going through the Kingsguard book and he's looking at his page and it just sort of stops towards the top of the page. It just lists out some really early accomplishments in his career as a Kingsguard, and the rest of the page is still blank, and he's looking at that going okay, I still get to write the rest of this page. I can figure myself out. And so that's when he starts really pulling himself together as a person again, and really thinking about what could I do besides just be the guy that fucks my sister and kills people. Hey, I said only once, so I don't have to put anything in the swear jar yet. But yeah, I think because of that, Jamie's a really good example of someone working his way through those toxic masculinity tropes.
I think it's the most dynamic character.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why Book Jamie has such a passionate following. When you first read that book series, you're like, Jamie Lannister, that guy's evil, and then as soon as you start getting in his head, you're like, this guy, there's a lot going on with him. There's a reason, he did all these things, and he actually saved everybody, but nobody knows because he has shit for honor, and
So, in contrast, particularly with the show, Ramsay Bolton, who on page one,
oh my god,
and by the time it's over with, is a caricature of evil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Joffrey is somebody who I wrote down here and said, oh, this guy's toxic masculinity. I can't even conceive of Ramsay Bolton on any sort of spectrum of...
I don't think there is one.
Yeah.
And you're coming out of
Ramsay's not a real person.
Bruce Bolton is not... I mean, this. You want to talk about, okay, we can trace the line from Tywin through Robert to Joffrey. Roose Bolton is not that.
All right. I'm just gonna. This is my thought on Ramsay.
When I think not that, I mean,
listen,
he's not equally that bad.
We don't even need to talk about Ramsay because he's not really a man. If your father was a vampire and your mother was a human, you'd be crazy too. No, really, he's beyond Is it I don't even know. I don't think psychopath is a term that is utilized really in medical. He's completely. He's above and beyond anything. There are reasons Joffrey is the way he is. I suppose there are certain things about Ramsay, his life that led him to be this person. But I really think the biggest part of it is that there are synapses that aren't firing.
Well, I think when your house sigil is a flayed man and you are himself a bastard, product of rape of Tywin, raping the miller's wife.
Roose.
Sorry, Roose.
See, I knew what you meant.
Thinking about those individuals, but he's always trying to prove himself as badder and badder, just in the same way Joffrey was. And that's why he's escalating over time into these series of behaviors.
You want to talk about whether he's a sociopath or whatever? I checked the DSM and he's cartoonish.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's what
Yeah, he's afflicted with cartoonism. I think we have a question.
We got 4 questions lined up.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it. We'll go questions.
All right. So, not to keep drawing it all back to Tywin, but
why not?
But
why not?
he deserves it.
One of the things that fascinates me, and I hear arguments all the time for and against Cersei as a character, but one of the things that fascinates me is just her drive to be, really to be her father, and how she wants to be this king, if nothing else. She wants to be a man. She wants to have that power and control, and she feels like she's stuck outside of the power cycle. But she accomplishes quite a bit as this person affected by this specific brand of toxic masculinity. So I just wanted to kind of hear your take on how that particular brand of craziness got escalated to the point that it did.
Cersei's one of my favorite characters, not to empathize with, but to watch, obviously. And I think that she's interesting in that her motivations are so explicitly maternal, right? But her methods are, as you say, not characterizing those ways. So I'm interested in the panel's views on Cersei as well. Jen, why don't you-
So yeah, Cersei is someone who is like looking. She's on the outside looking into masculinity, and so she's interpreting it as freedom, because she's looking at her own gender constraints. She's like, I have to marry who I'm told. I have to behave myself as a woman. There's things I'm allowed to do, things I'm not allowed to do, and I don't like this. And I see the men not having to deal with these constraints. So she's looking from the outside in, thinking, hey, masculinity looks awesome. Like I want to be part of that. But she's only seeing like the highlights of it. She's not seeing the downsides that the men actually have to deal with. Like they have to deal with, all these expectations and things that are put on them. So I think Cersei's idea of what a man should be like is almost like cartoonish in a lot of respects, because she's cherry picking what she wants out of it.
I think it was like a funhouse mirror.
Yeah, like it's very distorted. Like when I get to do what I want to do, I'm being like a man. But when people tell me no, you can't do that, it's because I'm a woman and not because I'm an idiot. Yeah,
it's very much like the grass is always greener on the other side. But what you said is literally exactly how I feel about Cersei. The reasons why she's doing what she's doing are her maternal instincts, but the way she goes about it is based on the way she was raised. And I mean, yes, Tywin being a big part of that, but honestly, how much did she really see her dad? She only knows the legends, not the man, really. But she's still been at court and has, and she sees what these men have and get to do, and she doesn't have that.
And
So
it's the goals of the woman who has to obey the rules of the men, and that's where she falls. Like that's where she has trouble navigating that terrain.
No, I was going to say she just wholeheartedly believes that had she been a man, that she could have accomplished this, and she could have been the firstborn son and accomplished all the greatness that House Lannister desired. She wholeheartedly in herself believes that. Regardless
of whether or not she's right, she's not right.
And like she's bad at a lot of things, but she believes the reason why people are telling her she's bad at it is because she's a woman and not because she's an idiot. She really, that's one of the reasons she surrounds herself with sycophants all the time, is because these people tell her how special and pretty she is, and they're, oh sure, I'll kill that guy for you. And the people who say, actually that's kind of a terrible idea, like she gets rid of all those people because, oh, they don't respect me because I'm a woman. Like she's, like when people say, oh, she just plays the woman card all the time, like Cersei is sort of like the cartoon example of how you would do that.
Next question.
Sorry. Bringing it back to the Unsullied, I kind of felt like it was a little unfair to even compare them with any gender, because that's their whole point, is they're not filling any gender role. Like Ned Stark definitely was filling the father role and the leader of all of the North, whereas the Unsullied are mindless drones. That's their job. They do what they are told. They do not have any agency, even when they work in a squad. They are told to clear, you clear it this way, in a house or something. You don't have any, you kill the children. You don't have any, moral idea. You do. That's
so. I think that there's a lot of truth in that. Sorry, go ahead.
And I wanted to move on to, in a similar vein, The Mountain, because I've never read the books, but I've only seen all the episodes of the show. And even before he was a zombie, he still was very benign. The only thing we've really seen from him is him doing what he did to his brother. And but besides that, he never speaks for the most part from what I've seen.
So I'll make a point, then I'll hand one off to these two, which is I think the Unsullied are like the clones. They're the clone army.
Yeah.
but they are filling the role of men, and by that they are held to the standards of the performance of males who they replace. They are unsullied. The reason why unsullied are also is because they kick the ass of all the other men. Therefore, they're better than women. Don't even show up in this argument, right? So that's just how it is. As for what was the other one? Oh, the mountain. The mountain gets a lot of off-screen activity in the show that goes on at length in the book. And here I'm going to hand it to Andrew.
Yeah. So the mountain. I mean, just as a background, some folks who don't see it, and one good resource, because they do go into this in the shows, but you have to buy the DVDs and go to watch the history and lore stuff, which gives you a lot of good background. If you really don't want to pick up a book, it's too boring. And the art is really awesome. The charcoal art they do for the history and lore, it really is beautiful, and it actually, I think, has gotten better season by season. But they go into the fact that the mountain actually, when they were storming King's Landing during Robert's Rebellion, he was sent on a personal mission to, take the baby. Thus, Oberyn being mad because that was his sister, taking the baby, smashing the baby, then raping her, and then killing her. So I wouldn't call him benign.
Sorry.
But that's extra information. It's something that I think they maybe don't spend enough time on in the shows, is how bad of a guy he is, and that he goes around essentially in the books. His task is go around pillage and loot and rape and terrorize this area, which is why the Brotherhood was trying to hunt him down. They were initially sent to stop him because he's a monster.
Maybe a better word or phrasing would be he's benign when he's shown on screen, because he wasn't even shown in the show for pushing his brothers, or maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think he was even shown directly on screen showing putting the Hound's head into the coals or anything.
And that was when he was a child. They were children, and it was over a doll.
Exactly.
It was because his brother was playing with a doll, and it's like, we shouldn't be playing with a doll. Get some fire, So I mean, once again, that's why I would say that. But there's no fault on you for not seeing that in the show.
I think of it as, that scene in Star Wars where Grand Moff Tarkin, they're all in the boardroom of the Death Star, and Vader's like running his, Tarkin says, "Vader, chill, you need to be at peace," and Vader just sort of stands there. If that was the only scene you ever got of Darth Vader, you'd be like, why does anybody care about this guy? Right? We know more.
Yeah, well, and the thing about Gregor is it's really even hard to say how much of the way he is, as bad as he is, as bad as we know him from in the books, has anything to do with masculinity, because he has migraines, really bad headaches, and that's, I think that the way that's worked into the text is that it's part of the reason why he's so awful, because he's just in constant pain, and he's just a miserable person. But he was awful when he was so young. I mean, obviously the standard thing, he burned his brother's face for playing with one of his toys that he didn't even want, and I'm pretty sure killed one or both of his parents. He's had several wives, maybe 2 or 3, but he's killed at least 1 or 2 of them in the books. So he's
super classy.
Yeah, and so he's just been kind of off the wall, really since he was super, super young. So there's things wrong with him that we might never get or there were things wrong with him we might never get any more details about. But yeah, he's a rough soul, that dude.
Let's see if we can squeeze in 2 more questions. Who's next? We've got 7 minutes to do this. We're going to be able to do it.
Okay, so my question's a little off topic of these, what we've been talking about just now. But I was wondering what you guys thought about, Yara Greyjoy, since she's a woman who wants the Salt Throne, and she was raised in this extremely toxic kind of masculinity household, but all of her brothers were dead or gone, like Theon, so she was raised kind of like a man by her father in place of the sons, and she acts a lot kind of like a man in some ways, but she's also definitely distinctly a woman in others. And I also, as part of that, I really liked Asha Greyjoy in the books, and I really connected with that character, and I did not feel that way about Yara in the show. And I can't really put my finger on why, and maybe you guys have some insight into what those differences are and why Yara is not as good.
I think Yara is sort of set up to be, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it jumps off to me. She's sort of this foil to Cersei in that Yara is confident, but she truly is held back because she's a woman, right? And I think the environment she's grown up in, it is a difference between between what's her dad's name?
Balin.
Balin, yeah. Balin and Tywin are both not exactly cool dudes, but Balin hasn't gotten there, right, with how Yara needs to be. She's the number one choice that he's got at hand.
So just talk a little bit about the TV show distinction, and I think at least I was glad they changed the name, so at least I could mentally kind of separate the two.
Yeah. They are not the same.
Yeah. So, but Asha in the books, to me, she does more of her own thing. She's out there raiding, claiming certain areas on her own. She has her own ship. She has the respect of her own men. Whereas in the show, although she does have some of these things, she's used, in my opinion, a little bit too much as an accessory to Theon's plot, right? So she is secondary and subservient to Theon's plot. I mean, I was even mad in the last episode of how much time they gave to Theon fighting random Greyjoy Captain number 5. What is this? And it's an important episode. We're giving 20 minutes to this guy. So, that's, I think, the issue with the show, and that's why I felt like it's treated in a different way. She comes and tries to save her brother because she loves her brother, which is something that typically is weakness. Her men say, "Oh, it's not a good idea. Just leave him," and yet she goes there because they're portraying this as a negative thing. So, but that's a big difference between the two characters.
Like a tiny quick follow-up. The way she is with women, I don't think that she is shown as being queer in the book.
No, she's open.
That's a difference as well that I'm not sure
Yeah,
how to interpret.
I believe in the books that she may be queer, but in the show, it appears that they're portraying her as just being, she is an outright lesbian, which would be great, except for the fact that I really think that they aren't doing it in the show for any positive reason. They are just, we're
lesbians.
Yeah, having representation, it counts a hell of a lot more D&D if it's good representation, which they just don't know how to do.
She's just a chick who makes out with chicks.
Yeah, which is kind of how they write her. This is two dudes writing a girl. This is like the drunk girl they want to see in the bar. Like, I'm over it.
Yeah, like I think I think the biggest difference between Yara and Asha is that Asha's a complete character. Like, she has her own motivation, she has her own agencies, she has things that she does for herself, and Yara, like Tara said, she's an accessory to somebody else's plot, and some of her biggest characteristics are either there to titillate the audience, or for the shock value, or because the plot requires her to do something, and so it doesn't make her a complete character. She's not doing anything. She's just kind of there, like, fucking women and like, woo, look at me kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh, man. Okay.
All right, one last question, I think.
So I've been rewatching season 5. Probably not an unpopular opinion, but I think it sucks. There's an excessive amount of that toxic masculinity of D&D that I was talking about a lot. Crazy number of attempted rapes. And, just aside from, unfortunately, what happened to Varys and Selmy notwithstanding, I think they make a lot more mistakes. And then they try to correct in season 6. I just want you guys' opinion on the correction towards female characters in season 6. Sansa, Arya, Yara, Cersei's resolutions.
I'll make a statement here that I think, I've said from the beginning of Game of Thrones, because I held this view 17 years ago, that Martin's arc was going to show the women overcoming the bullshit they have to deal with from the men. I think D&D have taken that too far. I think they tried to throw a little too many beanballs at the batters that are people that we care about on the show, and that people. I think they did a little bit too far into it. That's my view. But I don't think there's been an accusation that they got so much hell for it last year that now they made up for it this year.
Yeah, right. They don't care.
I don't think that's true. I agree with Tara. I don't think they care about that criticism. I think they are executing the game plan that they've always had, which is the girls are going to come up and be awesome. They just took a heck of a way to get there. I do think, however, that, and Tara, here, I'm very interested in your view on this. What they did to Sansa's character to deviate from the book, putting her in Winterfell, Tara, go for it.
Well, I mean, just to touch on that, like yes, there is rape that happens in these books, but Martin does not make us read it, okay? Just like he didn't make us read Theon's torture. But D&D don't know subtlety, so they throw it in our face, and they use these things as plot devices constantly. I mean, they have really stepped back from that, but really I think that's because that's always been their idea, their narrative choice, whatever, to have, this point where, okay, well, I guess we don't need to keep having people being raped. Guess what, guys? You didn't have to have it in the first place. Like Sansa being in Winterfell, I just honestly I don't even have thoughts on it other than like I was so grossed out I almost stopped watching the show. I still have never watched that episode a second time, and I think it's one of the only episodes of the show I haven't seen that I've only seen once. But yeah, I get why they did it, and honestly, I was on a panel at Ice and FireCon. I think it was maybe the first year of the convention, and we were joking about Roz, and I said something, about how maybe she was going to be Jane, but like Jane as Sansa instead of Jane as Arya, being sent up to Mary Ramsay. And then as a side note, I was like, God, I guess they could always like send Sansa back to Winterfell as herself, as Jane. And I was not serious about it. And so when it happened, I was like, oh God, like they took this drunk like Tara on a panel moment and like somehow found it. I don't know. But no, yeah, I get why they did it, but I don't think they needed to go to the level. If they really, 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 really had to bring her up to Winterfell, I don't like they could have handled it in 1,000 different ways, just like they could have handled a lot of other things 1,000 different ways that didn't involve having us watch these characters being raped and tortured for, just constantly throughout every season.
I think there's about all the time we have, guys.
So I'll give Andrew a comment.
No, I would say I completely agree. Spectacle for the point of spectacle is not really worth it, and everything Tara said is completely accurate there.
Okay, so that concludes our discussion here. Please rate the panel if you loved it. Please say that. If you have critiques, please give that too. We'll have you back next time, and please drop coins in the jar. Thank you.
Thank you.